internally we were talking about this like we were going to have some kind of debate or something, but I don't think any of us is on the wrong side of this issue.
No, I don't know that there is a wrong side. Because I've been thinking about it. Well, I was gonna say I feel like it really just it depends on so much stuff. Because I was thinking about, like, you know, as consultants, we go into people's environments all the time and we don't know what we're looking for. So search isn't usually my first stop. My first stop is navigation. And then I like to see, okay, well, this is how you guys think about stuff. And, you know, how can we hone in on that? And how can we use that? And, you know, so that, you know, from that standpoint, I'm like, all right, navigation wins. But if it's my own stuff, search wins. So it really just, it depends on what you're looking for. Do you know what you're looking for? You know, who are you looking for it for? So
yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
Well, go ahead.
Well, as I say, Richard and I kind of go round and around and around on this quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that we have a kind of a divide line there where I'm like, just search for it. Just search for it. Just search for it. Just search for it. And he's like, just do it, because you do it all the time for everything else. And not to say that the navigation side is wrong, because, okay, but should I have to always search for things, or should there be logical, easy buttons?
Exactly. Like, are there some things that should just be there? And it's like, you can find it. You don't have to think about it. Yes, some things should be. But if you're looking for something oddly specific, then yes, you should be able to search for it. Like, I don't want a navigation button for this random document, but I do want to be able to find it quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, I feel like maybe internet search has polluted people's way of looking at things, because they aren't used to a brand new, untrained search, which is what something like SharePoint is. You know, like when you go to Bing or Google, you're standing on the shoulders of millions of users. So when you type butter cookie recipe, you know, yes, it brings back every butter cookie recipe in the index, but the first couple are the ones that people have used a lot, or that have put a lot of effort into putting themselves at the top of the rankings. Whereas
or have paid to be at the top of the rankings.
When I say a lot of effort, I mean, it could be money, it could be
time is money.
You know, it could be optimization, it could be whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, so people just kind of expect that first thing to be a good option. And it's like, yeah, but you're not looking for, you know, butter cookie recipes. You're in a company that sells concrete, and you literally just typed concrete in the search. And so, yeah, it comes back with everything that's got the word concrete in it. Yes, that's exactly.
Because that's what you told it to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
And until a few dozen people have clicked on what you want, and kind of push that up to the top, you know, it's I don't want to say it's worthless, but it's just giving you what you asked for.
It is. Single keyword search is the most useless way to search for content. You can get away with it on Google for certain things, like you said, because it's got that whole history of things to look at. And we've got people that have been hurt and disillusioned by on-prem search that was never customized. There's never any thought put into. There was no graph to help it get better. SharePoint Online, Microsoft Search, it will get better. It will learn. It will see, and things will improve even without care and feeding of the search schema behind it.
But you have to use it.
Yeah.
So,
and the same thing was true on-prem. It did have some intelligence built into it. You did have to, you know, get some use into it. But like when people say, I mean, it did, you know, it didn't learn as quickly, you know, but in terms of an on-prem search solution, it was really quite good compared to some of the alternatives.
It certainly could have been worse.
It absolutely could have been.
I mean, it could always be worse.
But I think the thing is that people are used to...
Said the SharePoint consultant.
Well, I used to say it could always be worse. I could poke you in the eye.
Yeah, it's true. Like, you know, when I ask people, you know, how's it going, and they're like, I can't complain. I'm like, then you're not really trying.
Right. You're not looking hard enough.
Yeah, I mean, but I just think that, you know, like when people start talking about like doing, you know, kind of search optimizations, like, well, if I search for this word, you know, I want this to appear. That should be navigation. I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't be search as well. But
sure.
if it's something that you already know the word, you already know exactly what people are looking for, that should be navigation. You know, if somebody types in expense report and you're like, and we want to go here first, well, then there should be
an easy button
navigation that says expense report.
And that's where it can get political, though, if we're not careful, because if I am a very important person in the company and I use this one obscure thing and I don't want to have to look for it, it should just be there anytime I click for it. That's when sites turn into link farms really fast. So we have to be careful with things like that. So, you know, those more politically powerful people in the organization are the ones that complain the loudest, and IT's just tired. Fine, here's your link. Kind of ruin a well thought out, well planned navigation for everybody else.
Well, and that happened like when I was contracting with the Air Force. We had a top nav, we had a left nav, and then that wasn't enough. They wanted a right nav. And, you know, like there were links that were in, some of them were in more than one, some of them were only in one, but it was like they were always looking for, well, let's add a new jump point from here. And it was like, no, let's not do that. But we were in 2007 at the time. So, I mean, there were a lot of things going on because it was 2014. Sure. So, I mean, it was a whole new world. And then when we migrated,
here we are in 2022, and you know, SharePoint has a top nav, another top nav, and a side nav. So,
well, and then the communication site versus the team site, like, you know, don't even get me started on that. Like, that would blow their minds these days.
We can't have navigation overload if we're not careful. And I have noticed having the conversation of walking people back from duplicating their hub or their homepage navigation in the new global nav. Like, you don't need the cafeteria menu to follow people to the team sites. Maybe you do. I mean, food is important. You can't.
I was going to say, like, that's not the best example because I kind of do.
I am going to walk that back. You should let the cafeteria menu follow. But
that should always be like the top link.
Probably, because nobody wants to work hangry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Bad example on my part. But, you know, every policy, every procedure, our corporate values and our leadership blog maybe shouldn't go to every site. But the things that we need people to be able to get to, no matter where they are, that's very, very important. Go global. Go global.
Well, and I have the same concerns about search, though. Like when, you know, like you said, somebody powerful is like, well, when somebody searches for this word, it should come up with this result. You can come out with a very curated search that's difficult to use for anything except for those items, you know, because
promoted result,
getting the top result for everything, you know, and, you know, all of the tricks that you use for searching for things on the internet are the tricks that you can use in something like SharePoint or Teams. You just have to go with it. You have to go with the idea that you have to know something more about the document than the word that it contains or, you know, part of the title or that it's a Word document. You know, I mean, you have to know a little bit more about it. And so the way you approach search, you know, has to be a little different. And I think the same thing when you're in Teams. You know, Teams can be a little confusing to search in but you have to really think about what you're searching for, because you're like, okay, I had a conversation last week with Allie, and I know that one of us said something about mackerel, you know, and you're like, you know, you type in the word mackerel and come to find out, like, you've got a whole group of employees who talk about fishing a lot. And then, you know, you just have to know where to search and narrow it down a little bit. Somebody asked me to delete something the other day. And I focused in on a phrase, you know, somebody said something and it had like 2 exclamation points. Come to find out, that particular person uses that phrase a lot. You know, the 2 exclamation points and everything. So I looked for that exact phrase and it came up in like 4 different places. And I was like, surely this will get me. No, not get me right there. It, you know, it took me to a
catchphrase.
Yeah, it was like, you know, like cowabunga.
Caramba.
I need to know what this is about.
The other thing that drives me crazy in the team search is like you can't jump into the conversation easily, or sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. But like, you know, I'm like, okay, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I know it happened around this time. And so like you can kind of narrow it down, but then you can never really like get back to that. You have, you know, it's hard to make that search kind of stick. And it's very, very frustrating, especially like I've been doing that with Rob Windsor's chat a lot, where like there were things that, you know, he handed off right before he left. And I'm like, what was that again? Or where did that? And I'm like constantly searching and I can't remember what I searched for to find it last time. And it's just like, oh, this is driving me nuts.
Nuggets of Wisdom, Rob Windsor.
That would be a massive list.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, like I said, I think a lot of it is just that people aren't really thinking about what they're searching for. They're, you know, they aren't considering, you know, how search has to work in a narrow sense, you know, because I mean, Google is huge, you know, it covers, you know, a large portion of the visible internet.
Yes, it does.
But when you go looking for something, you know that, like, and so just unconsciously, there are some things that you skip. You know, you skip all the things that have a sponsored mark next to them, and you know, skip all the things that, you know, have like crazy URLs, you know, or just, you know, some random thing out there to trap people to make you look at ads or something. But in a way, looking at a smaller amount of data is worse, because a lot of that data is about the same stuff. You know, it's got the same keywords in it. It's got the same kinds of phrases. And a lot of times it has the same authors. Because you know, in a company of 200 people, any one of those people may have written a significant percentage of what is in your intranet.
Or it might all be published by one person. Like, it, you know, if we were looking at the blog or something, you know, everything that went out there may have been pushed out by Stacy, even though she didn't write it or, you know, create it.
Right.
So what do you think the big disconnect is? Because there definitely is one. When I would say 75% of the folks that I talk with, we start talking about search. There's some kind of a disconnect. It's like, what do you mean? Our users are not going to search for work content. Like, we search for stuff all the time. And used to people would talk about like, well, it's a generational thing. I don't hear that pushback hardly at all anymore.
It's a cultural thing now. It's not generational at all. So what I notice, again, as a consultant, a lot of the stuff that people come to me for is stuff that they could search for and they don't know how. And I think that carries over into their intranets. Like, they don't know how to Google. They don't know how to Google effectively. So they, you know, aren't going to go out and type butter cookie recipe, non-dairy, and, you know, use quotes and stuff. They're just going to type butter cookie recipe and then scroll through pages, or, you know, they're going to go to Pinterest and do it from there, or, you know, like, but they don't know how to search effectively. And then it takes them so long to find what they're looking for. They get discouraged or they get frustrated. So they just ask us instead. And, you know, like I always joke, like, well, I just professional Google, because that's, you know, a lot of the times, like, people come to me with an obscure question and I'm like, you may be the only people on earth that have ever encountered this, but let's find out. And, you know, you might end up on, you know, that old forum post from 2007 where that one other person had this issue and you're like, did you ever find the answer? But, you know, people don't know how to search, and they don't know how to refine search, and they don't know how to take a broad search and say, okay, that wasn't quite what I was looking for. How can I, you know, tweak that a little bit? And so, you know, they just don't do it. And you're not going to teach them how to do it for work documents if they won't do it for, you know, their personal interests, if that makes sense. Like, why would I learn how to search for work if I don't even know how to search for my own, you know, browsing?
Give me a button.
Right? Give me a button. Tell me where it is.
We have found the consultant who's like, it's a training issue. And I don't disagree. You know, I think there's a lack of understanding of how to search. And then I think there's also a lack of understanding about when to search. And I also think there's a little bit of resentment about the change a lot of times. Because every time we go in to a customer, no matter what we're migrating from, whether we're migrating from another SharePoint environment, or we're migrating from file shares or Google Docs or anything else, one of the first things they say to whoever's doing the DPS is, we can't find anything.
But we don't want to change.
Yeah, but we don't want to change anything. Like, we want the structure of everything to be the same, you know, because we can't find anything, but the things that we know how to get to, we know that it is the August folder, the 2001 folder, the, you know, second quarter folder, and tax filings. So to them, they're like, that's how simple can that be? And it's like, have you asked a person who just started at your company how simple that is? Because it's not. I mean, you know.
Well, I have that conversation a lot with a customer that we've started doing their intranet modernization. They're online, but they did a lift and shift, and they really didn't modernize anything. And when I did the focus group conversations, every group I met with said, I can't find policies or procedures easily because the navigation was constructed per department, owning department of the policy or procedure. They're like, I don't know who owns the policy. I just know I need a policy for this thing. And it might have been for an operations team. It might have been written by a safety team. They don't know because that line was blurred. They just need to know how to do the thing.
And that's a case where obviously metadata, like you could tag that as operations, and then you could also tag it as policy, and then you could search policy and find it. But if you're just using navigation, it's like that file share issue. Which folder did I put it in? Did I put it in operations or did I put it in policies? And it's just, you know, it's impossible to find if you don't know where to look.
Yep. Oh, that's my dog.
I've found a few people though, a few customers, like in discussions like this, where they'll say, oh, you know, it was in this folder, policies, operations. And then I'm like, so where are you looking? And they're like, I don't know. And I was like, have you tried operations? I mean, that was the name of the folder, you know.
But my favorite is still, well, it's in both. What do you mean it's in both? Well, so people were looking for it under operations and they were looking under policies. So we just decided to put a copy in both. And it's like.
And then, you know, like,
and that's when
for it to be in both, you know. And when they ask that, they mean that literally, you know, like we've got an operations and we've got a, you know, procedures site collection, and we put the same document in both, but keep them linked.
Oh, that's even better.
And you can, in a way, I mean, because you can put a link, you know, from one to the other in the document library. You know, or you could put the same navigation in both, you know, where you have a link in the navigation or in a quick link or something that goes to the same document. That's all part of the modernization that, you know, because with metadata, it can be both. It's just got to be in the same library.
Yep. It can live in one spot and show up in many.
Yeah. So, I mean,
so
I think,
what's your number one piece of advice for someone and they're like, which way do we go? How do we make it work for those that think it should be navigation? And then we have the other people that says, just search for it. What's the best common ground?
To me, it's okay. You know, people are looking for it and you know where it is. That's a navigation case. You know, and so there are places and there are things that are common for everybody. And those, I think, should be a navigation case. And then you have to kind of give people a little instruction on how to use like filters and views, you know, and things like that to deal with the lists and libraries. For search, you know, to Allie's point, they almost always need some training for search. Because it's a lot like Bing or Google, but it's not exactly. And so you have to have a little bit of training to get by on that. And that may even be just like a hot sheet of, you know, tips or tricks or whatever. But there's no way that you can make navigation that covers every case. And that's the thing, you know, navigation is like a road sign. You know, if you know where people are going, you know, they're on this highway goes through these cities, you can give them navigation signs along the way.
And then you can say, maybe they're not going to these cities and we're coming up on an intersection. You can go on the intersection for that city and you can kind of predict like those big mile markers, but you can't detect like, oh, this person's going to the post office, you know, and you don't want to put navigation to the post office in this little city in your global nav, because, you know, how often are people going there as opposed to, you know, Tulsa or Dallas or, you know, whatever. So it really is that matter of, you know, knowing where people are going the most often and where like the big points of interest are. Those go in your navigation. Small points of interest and little, you know, niche things, teach people how to search for them, teach people how to Google Map.
Well, I think a lot of people, they want a navigation like the road signs that you see like in little tourist towns on the coast. Like you'll be in a town of like 5,000 people and then they'll have a sign up that's like, you know, London this way,
Anaheim that way.
You know,
Orlando. Woo.
And it's like, you know, great
global navigation.
Literal.
Like I can go anywhere from here.
I sure can.
You know, but that's kind of what their navigation looks like. It's like you're pointing to just random stuff that people may or may not ever go to.
Yeah. And like, yeah, it's technically correct. Like it's oriented the right way, but is it useful? Not really.
Is useful. And if it's not useful on a web page, it's going to be clutter and it's going to distract from the useful things. And I think that's where the breaking out into like landing pages, because okay, HR this way, and through the mega menu, you can put the links to the 3 or 5 most common things that we need from HR. But then you can just go to the HR site and you can get those. Here's the post office. Here's, you know, the most popular brew pub in
benefits,
town.
Pay stubs.
Right.
And I'm not
cool stuff.
Yeah.
I have sympathy for people where they say like, well, we don't know who owns it, you know, because you're like, well, what are you looking for? The world's biggest ball of twine. Well, what state is it in? I don't know. You know,
and how do you verify that
thing?
You know, but you know, you have to maybe look at that problem as a structural problem. It's not a problem with search. It's not a problem with navigation. It's a structural problem. Like if people are looking for policies and their biggest issue is they don't know who owns it, well, then maybe you need to clarify that, or you need to centralize your policies, or you need to do something about that problem, because the problem isn't search itself. It's not navigation itself. If you've got policies scattered all over your environment, and people have no idea how to get to the one that they want, then maybe you should be organizing your policies by their purpose instead of by their owner. You know, and that's not something you can solve with search or navigation, really. Because I mean, it's, you know, it's chaos, you know, and you know, sometimes taming chaos is the answer. It's not, you know, how do we use this tool to tame chaos? You tame the chaos first, and then
you use the tool. Well, it's like, well, it's like, you know, taming is a really good analogy for this. Like, I'm thinking of like when you've got an animal with like a matted coat, and you're like, you know, how do I fix this? Well, you shave it and then you maintain it from there. And that's exactly what you have to do in that sort of situation, is you have to take it back to like ground zero and rethink the way that you're doing everything, and then set rules in place and say, I'm going to brush this every day. And, you know, from here on out, this is where these things go, because otherwise it's just going to get retangled. And, you know, so taming the chaos and then maintaining it is exactly what, you know, most people need to do. But it's also the one thing that they are so intimidated by doing that they absolutely cannot or will not do it. So then it becomes kind of like a self-licking ice cream cone where, you know, they've got all this content and they want to know how to find it better, but they don't want to clean it up first. So it's like, well, you can't have it both ways. You kind of have to do a little bit of both. And they don't like to hear that.
It's hard. It's intimidating. It's different. And they've got an entire user base behind them going, wait, you're doing what?
What now? I need those documents. Do you?
Wait, why wasn't I in on this argument? You know, why?
Right. And that's hard. But I mean, like in this conversation, we've talked about, you know, navigation and search, obviously, but user habits, cultural habits inside of the organization, the need for assessing, right? How do people use the tools that have been given to them? Not just what tools are they using, how are they using them? And then the importance of the governance that kind of goes around all of that. And training's always, I think, always going to be a thing, because even if we do shave the coat of this poor little tangled up beast, right? How often do we have to brush it as this guy starts growing out, right? How do we do it? What tool should we be using? What's the frequency, right? What's the governance?
Who's responsible for doing it?
Right.
And how? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of moving parts for sure. Yeah, no, this is good. I appreciate you guys jumping on. And I realized we didn't even intro this video. We just were like,
no, we just jumped right in. I was like, are we live already? Great.
You hit the button and you were like, okay. And then you paused and I'm like, start talking.
Jump in.
Yeah, we did. So
that's what we do. That's what we do. All
well,
right.
and so often, like, that's what people need, is somebody to help them just jump into that conversation, because, you know, we can't make these decisions for organizations. They have to make the choices themselves, but they need someone who will help them jump in and start having these conversations, start understanding these concepts, and then ultimately making the decisions. So, you know, that's why we do what we do, because you turn on the camera and we jump in.
We just jump in. And you know, it's funny. I was talking with a colleague in the community today. Same thing. We never met face to face, but it's just as soon as the camera on Teams was on, we just started talking about stuff. I realized we never actually introduced ourselves to each other, but we just started talking about what we do, and it was really great. And I think that's what's fun about, especially our team. We're always so excited. We put a post in Teams about, hey, has anyone ever done this? And it's, here comes all the stuff.
Yep.
Well, I'm always like, I'm the one that just started talking, but I'm always afraid that, like, it's going to come off basically as like, oh, you're doing it wrong. And then they're like, well, then what's the right way? And we're like, oh, that depends on what you want to do.
I can tell you what's wrong, but I cannot tell you what's right.
Well, yeah. That's the thing too. It's just to go, okay, now with a lot of different options we have here. Oh no, don't do that though. Trust me, we've
ever do that.
We've had to fix that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. I guess we'll do the intro last as what's the opposite of an intro? An outro? I don't know. This is going to be the first of what I hope will be a continuing series of just Pait Group roundtable conversations. I wanted to call it like a no holds barred, but I don't know. We all tend to agree too much on things for it to ever really turn into a fight.
Isn't it weird how that happens? Because
kind of boring.
I've never physically met Allie.
Mm-mm.
I've met you twice physically. And like from the moment some of us met, like we have exactly the same opinion about various aspects of doing the things that we do. And I think it's just because we've seen so many of the same problems.
We have a shared trauma.
Yeah. Like an organizational PTSD.
Hey, that'll bond a group better than anything, I'll tell you.
Oh, yeah. It's not true. Who was it? You were helping someone, Stephen. Distributed cash. They were having a distributed cash issue. And as soon as you said that phrase, I actually kind of just locked up. Oh, gosh. Wow. Past life. I'm glad that's over.
Show us on the server where it hurt you.
On the server.
Right in the distributed
Which folder
cash.
was it? Was it policies or was it operations?
Both. 100%. All right. Well, thank you again. Go team
I'm
go.
Stephen Wilson. I'm an Office 365 architect at Pait Group.
Yes, you are.
Joy Apple, who earlier said something like, well, suppose you're a big deal in your company. She's a big deal in our company.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
And Allie, she just has that one name, like Cher or
just
Sting.
the one. Yep.
She's just Allie.
At least it's not a symbol. We appreciate that.
Gang signs. Hashtag Allie. There you go. SharePoint therapist.
That's it. I love it. So, yeah, you can always get in touch with Allie to talk through all of the trauma that SharePoint has caused you in your life. I think we all play that role a bit at Pait Group. There's a lot of times when even like the deployment planning conversations that I have a lot, it's kind of corporate therapy, just talking through, what works, what doesn't work, how would you like things to work, and how can we make your life better? And that just, the conversation goes.
There's really nothing sadder than having a conversation with a customer about, something in Office 365, email, SharePoint, whatever. And in the middle of the call, somebody's like, you have a very soothing voice. And I'm like, it is so sad that you need a soothing voice right now. Like,
I mean, sometimes that's all people need is just that soothing voice. Or they just need to vent about what they don't like. Sometimes that's the most beneficial part of these conversations is just being able to say, I really hate this. I know I can't fix it, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the magic. We go, well, maybe we can't fix it today, but tell me what you think might be better.
We can at least make it less bad.
Let's make it less
But while
bad.
we're doing it, we have to point out that you have Stockholm syndrome from your old system.
Yes.
Well, I'm kind of wondering now if we need to change like the Pait Group thing from powerful alone, invincible together to we can make it less bad.
We can make it less bad.
I tried several years ago. I tried to get us T-shirts that said "I've got 99 problems, but SharePoint ain't one."
Except it is.
Well, no, for us.
No.
For us. Though I do have to point out to people, like when, you know, somebody gets me cornered on a call and they ask me something, you know,
how
and
do you guys do it?
They want me to demo it right then. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take you to our SharePoint, but
do as I say, not as we do.
Toddlers, children rarely
never have good shoes. Exactly.
We're too busy doing everybody else's.
Well, and so often, you know, like the Pait Group intranet, oh my goodness, we still have stuff on the SharePoint site that I built when I was an intern in 2013. Like, so just saying, like sometimes when you're the consulting company, when the new things come out and they're fun and exciting, you build them and then you never go back and redo them. And, you know, it works, but it's not how we want to do it now. It's not how I'm going to recommend a client do it today, but it's how we do it because that's how we built it. So
our homepage looks good.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Well, I'll tell you, as a technologist today, I opened up the Outlook PWA, and for some reason, the view was totally different. There was no reading pane. It was just the full screen, left to right, the subject of the email, like the first line.
Mm-hmm.
And I froze. I just stared at it.
I don't like this.
This is not normal. I did not do, and I thought about going to settings and poking at it. And I
was gonna say, just close it and like, we'll check this later.
We'll just come back in, and it was fine. But I'm sitting there shaming myself now because for that 30 seconds that felt like an eternity, I was like, I don't know what this
I don't think I like this.
And you heard a voice in the back of your head that said, have you tried turning it off and on again?
Everything froze. All right. I think our job here is done. I'm going to end the broadcast. All right. Well, thank you very much. And for whoever ends up seeing this interesting, whatever it's going to be, thank you for joining. And we'll have some contact information and all that good stuff at the end. If you need Pait Group, we are here to help. We'll make it less bad.
I love it.
Bye.
Bye.